Let's kick things off with a simple mental image. Visualize a map of the Middle East. Zoom in on the Persian Gulf, right down to the Strait of Hormuz. At its tightest spot, it's barely 21 miles across. Yet it stands as the absolute most critical bottleneck in the entire global energy grid, every single day. A fifth of the planet's oil and liquefied natural gas flows through this exact stretch of water. But if you look at that strait right now, literally at this very second, it's become a massive floating prison for thousands of international seafarers. We're talking about real human beings stranded on massive cargo ships. Merchant marine crews hailing from India, the Philippines, Ukraine, Pakistan, and countless other nations. These are the working class individuals who kiss their families goodbye to sail the trade routes that literally keep our global economy breathing. Today, they are deadlocked in a terrifying limbo, an impenetrable U.S. naval blockade staring them down from one side, and harsh Iranian lockdown measures on the other. They can't dock at Iranian terminals, and they certainly aren't allowed to sail out of the Gulf. They are marooned in a vital shipping lane that has effectively morphed into an active combat zone. Back home, their families are living in agonizing uncertainty. Shipping companies are paralyzed, knowing any move risks, getting their multi-million-dollar vessels and crews seized, and while foreign governments are frantically working the back channels to negotiate a lifeline, the average American hasn't heard a whisper about this humanitarian crisis on the evening news. And that's exactly why we need to tackle this right out of the gate. We have to look at the flesh and blood collateral damage of a strategic standoff that mainstream coverage treats like some kind of high stakes, abstract geopolitical board game. There is nothing abstract about this. There never was. In this video, we're going to pull back the curtain and expose the complete, unfiltered reality of what's unfolding out there, especially the dark corners. Everyone else is ignoring. Stick around, because we have massive ground to cover, and every single domino that falls in the Gulf crashes right into your wallet at the gas pump. It strikes at the core of America's international alliances, and it actively threatens the strategic dominance of the United States in a rapidly shifting world that every single citizen needs to be paying attention to right now. We need to talk about the most critical piece of intelligence to drop in the last 24 hours. It is flying completely under the radar in mainstream coverage. But once you grasp the domino effect it's about to trigger, you'll understand why this is the defining story of the moment. Abbas Araghchi, Iran's foreign minister, just touched down in Moscow for a face-to-face sit-down with Vladimir Putin. Now, let's unpack why this specific handshake changes the entire threat matrix. If you just glance at the headlines, a foreign minister meeting with a head of state looks like standard, everyday diplomacy. Let me be clear, there is absolutely nothing standard about this. It is a calculated power play, and the timing of it should have every strategist in Washington sounding the alarm. Just look at the geopolitical chessboard right now. The U.S. Navy has Iranian ports in a stranglehold. Our own envoys just bailed on peace talks in Pakistan because the travel time was inconvenient. Tehran's foreign ministry has flat out declared that the Strait of Hormuz is never going back to the way it was. And right in the middle of this explosive Mexican standoff where diplomatic channels are practically dead, Iran's chief diplomat boards a flight. He doesn't head to Oman. He doesn't go to Islamabad or any neutral peace broker. He goes straight to the Kremlin. To understand the sheer strategic gravity of this, you have to look at what Moscow extracts from Iran being backed into a corner, a reality most analysts are completely missing. Russia is choking under heavy American and Western sanctions of its own. They are bogged down in a grinding war in Ukraine that has pushed their economy and global alliances to the breaking point. Washington and its allies have essentially locked Putin out of the global banking system. So Moscow is watching the Middle East ignite with extreme enthusiasm It's not out of some deep-seated loyalty to Tehran. It's simple math. Every single month, the U.S. military machine is bogged down policing the Persian Gulf is a month America's eyes are taken off Ukraine, off the NATO frontier, and off the Indo-Pacific. By isolating Iran, the U.S. has practically gift-wrapped a strategic partner for Russia. Tehran is desperate for military hardware. They need a backdoor to bypass crushing sanctions, and they are hunting for alternative financial networks that don't rely on the U.S. dollar. Most importantly, they need an ally who won't cave to American ultimatums. And the pipeline of benefits flows both ways. Iran walks away with advanced Russian air defense batteries, a diplomatic shield at the UN Security Council, a willing buyer for the sanctioned crude oil our blockade is trapping, and the ultimate psychological weapon validation. It sends a message to the world that the American maximum pressure campaign has a ceiling and that Tehran has a heavyweight patron backing them up. So, what does this actually mean for the U.S. naval blockade? The entire Pentagon playbook for this blockade hinges on one theory of victory: squeeze Iran's economy so violently that the financial pain forces them to the negotiating table. You make the punishment of resisting worse than the cost of surrendering. But that entire doctrine shatters when Russia steps in to act as a shock absorber. What happens when Russian banking alternatives neutralize the sting of getting cut off from the dollar? What happens when Moscow's diplomatic umbrella shields Tehran from international isolation? What happens when Russian surface-to-air missiles fortify Iranian skies while they drag out negotiations? The blockade loses its teeth. It doesn't fail overnight, but it gets severely degraded. And a degraded, ineffective blockade means the American taxpayer is left footing the bill, staring at $4.09 a gallon at the local pump, bleeding money for a strategy that isn't delivering results. We have to bridge this right into another major shockwave that hit the wire today, because the two are inextricably linked. This past Sunday, British Prime Minister Keir Starmer picked up the phone and called Donald Trump. If you read the official readout out of 10 Downing Street, the language used should stop you in your tracks. Starmer didn't mince words. He explicitly warned of severe consequences for the global economy and the crushing cost of living for British citizens, thanks to the ongoing gridlock in the Strait of Hormuz. His message to the Oval Office was blunt: we desperately need to get those shipping lanes open right now. Take a second to really digest what it means when the head of the United Kingdom dials up the commander-in-chief and drops a phrase like severe consequences. We're talking about Britain here, America's most ironclad ally, the bedrock of the special relationship. This is the nation that bled with us on the beaches of Normandy, in the freezing mud of Korea, through the deserts of the Gulf, and in the mountains of Afghanistan. They are our deepest intelligence partner in the Five Eyes network. So when our absolute best friend on the global stage rings us up to essentially say, your military strategy is burning down our economy and starving our people, and you need to fix it, you listen. This isn't Beijing or Moscow throwing shade. This is our oldest brother in arms issuing a red alert warning. What makes this call even more radioactive is the backdrop. Right now, London is already sitting on Trump's bad side regarding NATO. The Brits flat out refused to participate in the U.S. naval blockade against Iran. Instead, they spearheaded a massive 30-nation counter-coalition alongside France, aimed at reopening the strait through diplomacy rather than putting warships in the crosshairs. So, the U.S.-UK dynamic is already walking on eggshells. Yet, Starmer still made that call. Why? Because the financial bleeding caused by this blockade is so catastrophic that the British Prime Minister felt he had absolutely no choice but to confront the American president directly. He's warning of brutal economic shockwaves for regular working-class citizens. And that includes your cost of living. To look at the sheer math, since the bombs started falling, The European Union has hemorrhaged an extra $24 billion on energy imports. That's $24 billion out the window. And in the EU, Commission's own agonizing admission, without receiving a single extra molecule of gas or oil, they are bleeding capital just to tread water. All because Hormuz is an active kill zone and the energy grids are fractured. And you're feeling it stateside. Gas in America is sitting at $4.11 a gallon today. That's up from $4.02 just over a week ago. We've seen 5 consecutive days of pain at the pump. It might be slightly below the recent peak of $4.17, but the needle is absolutely moving in the wrong direction again. And just to pour gasoline on the fire, Tehran just released a statement declaring that the Strait of Hormuz will, under no circumstances, return to its previous state. Under no circumstances. Let's break down why those specific words are a geopolitical earthquake. Up until now, Washington has essentially banked on the idea that if we can just squeeze Iran into making nuclear concessions, a deal gets struck. The strait miraculously reopens. The cargo ships sail. Oil plummets. And your gas bill shrinks. The narrative is that this economic chokehold is strictly temporary, tied directly to the lifespan of the negotiations. Iran just nuked that assumption. Tehran is broadcasting loud and clear that no matter what happens at the nuclear negotiating table, the version of the Strait of Hormuz that existed prior to February 28th is dead and buried. They are deliberately decoupling the waterway from the nuclear talks. They are telling the world they have permanently rewritten the strategic calculus of the Persian Gulf. Now, in the high-stakes game of international diplomacy, you could argue this is just a hardball negotiating tactic. It could be Tehran flexing its leverage, making sure Washington knows the economic pressure won't magically vanish. The second a pen hits paper, we've seen that kind of posturing before. It's entirely possible that under no circumstances is just their aggressive opening bid rather than their final answer. But you have to entertain the terrifying alternative they might be telling the absolute truth. Iran's top brass may have finally realized that controlling the strait is their ultimate trump card. It is their master switch to paralyze global energy markets. The second America dials up maximum pressure, and having finally flipped that switch and proven their willingness to use it, they have zero interest in giving that power back unconditionally. If that's the dark reality we are stepping into, if Hormuz remains a contested fortress even after a hypothetical nuclear treaty, then the financial nightmare timeline stretches out infinitely. Elevated gas prices won't just linger for a few months, they could become the permanent new normal, forever locked higher than they were before the end of February. Wall Street is already reading the writing on the wall. Oil futures are projecting Brent crude to stubbornly sit between $86 and $90 a barrel heading into the final quarter of the year. Even if everything goes perfectly, even if we get a diplomatic miracle and the sea mines are cleared out in 6 months, the market is betting heavily against oil ever returning to pre-war sanity this year. Just look at Citi, one of the biggest financial juggernauts on the planet. They've officially hiked their Brent crude forecast all the way through 2026. Their baseline expectation is $80 a barrel by the fourth quarter. Compare that to the $73 it was trading at on February 27th, right before the bombs started falling. That is the price of this standoff. We need to pivot to Lebanon. I've been hammering on this front for 2 solid weeks. And I'm going to keep putting it right in front of you because the situation on the ground is deteriorating at a terrifying pace. The American public needs this reality burned into their understanding of the wider war. Let's look at the raw numbers. Since March 2nd, Israeli airstrikes have claimed 2,559 lives in Lebanon. Let that number sink in. Over 7,700 wounded. We were sold a ceasefire on April 16th, a deal the Trump administration essentially took a victory lap over. Yet, since that so-called pause in fighting took effect, we've seen 47 more bodies drop. That includes 2 children killed just this past Sunday, marking the absolute bloodiest day of a ceasefire that supposedly stopped the violence. Both Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu and Hezbollah are actively dialing up the heat. Airstrikes are still pounding the southern front while Hezbollah keeps launching drone and rocket swarms across the border. Calling this a ceasefire is a bad joke. It's just a holding pattern that bleeds civilian lives every single day. I made a promise earlier this week that I wouldn't let Lebanon slip through the media cracks, because the sheer scale of the human devastation there is being criminally ignored by mainstream networks. So let's frame it clearly one more time. 2,559 dead, 1 million Lebanese citizens ripped from their homes in a nation of just 7 million. That is 14% of an entire country's population. Gone. We are looking at verified satellite intelligence showing whole villages being systematically wiped off the map and over 1,400 structures reduced to rubble. We're talking about UNESCO-protected heritage sites being leveled by bulldozers. And all of this is happening under the banner of a ceasefire that continues to produce casualties daily, right down to the kids we lost this weekend. This is the Lebanese front of the conflict. It's grinding away right alongside the nuclear standoff, the naval blockades, the backroom deals in Moscow, and the frantic phone calls from London. Every single thread is connected, all tracing back to the dominoes that fell on February 28th. Now, let's circle back to the trapped seafarers, because I gave you my word at the top of this breakdown that we wouldn't forget them, and I plan to honor that. The International Maritime Organization, the UN's authority on global shipping, is getting flooded with desperate distress signals from the Persian Gulf. These are merchant sailors, blue-collar guys from the developing world who took a grueling job on a cargo ship just to send a better paycheck home. Right now, they are sitting ducks, wedged right between 2 massive naval blockades. They can't pull into Iranian docks because of the American military interdiction, and they can't sail out of the Gulf because of Tehran's lockdown. They are quite literally parked inside a live-fire kill zone, doing nothing but waiting. The IMO, along with the International Chamber of Shipping, is pleading for a humanitarian corridor, a guaranteed safe passage just to get these merchant vessels and their crews out alive. But here is the bitter reality. Neither Washington nor Tehran has stepped up to formally greenlight that corridor. These men aren't combatants. They aren't wearing uniforms. They aren't diplomats calling the shots. And they certainly didn't sign up to be collateral damage. They are just working-class guys who kiss their families goodbye to do a job, only to find themselves held hostage by a war that erupted while they were miles out at sea. Let's step back and look at the grand chessboard. I want to pull all these fragmented headlines together and hand you the unfiltered strategic reality. Because as an American taxpayer and voter, you deserve the unvarnished truth. Right now, Tehran's top diplomat is shaking hands in Moscow, forging a shadow axis that directly undercuts American leverage. The British Prime Minister, our most ironclad ally, is practically blowing up the White House switchboard, warning of severe economic blowback. Iran is flat out stating that the Strait of Hormuz is permanently altered, completely wiping out the fantasy that a quick nuclear handshake will fix the global gas crisis. Wall Street is actively bracing for Brent crude to stubbornly sit at $80 to $90 a barrel through the end of the year. And you are already feeling the sting of $4.11 at the pump, with the needle creeping up. Over in the Levant, the body count in Lebanon has surged past 2,500 under a so-called ceasefire. That bleeds out a little more every single day. Out in the Persian Gulf, thousands of civilian merchant sailors are locked in a floating purgatory with zero humanitarian exit strategy. And Washington's diplomats, they're skipping crucial face-to-face peace talks in Pakistan because they simply don't want to deal with a long flight. That is the complete ugly picture. All the pieces on the board, and looking at this chaotic landscape After decades of tracking, analyzing, and participating in the grind of American foreign policy, I have to be brutally honest. I've seen our military stretched thin. I've watched Washington make catastrophic miscalculations. I've witnessed the brutal gap between political intentions and ground-level reality, from the dirt of Somalia to the Balkans. But what we are watching unfold right now possesses a very specific, terrifying characteristic. We are operating in a conflict that has completely lost its theory of resolution. What is a theory of resolution? It's the end game. It is the definitive answer to one fundamental question. How does this actually end? It's not just about who waves the white flag or what the final treaty looks like. It is the exact tactical sequence of events that gets us from this current powder keg to a reality where the guns go silent. The cargo ships flow, gas prices plummet, and our service members come home safely. Look back at the 1999 Kosovo campaign. We had a crystal clear theory of resolution: pound Serbian military infrastructure from the sky, squeeze them politically via our NATO allies, apply the Rambouillet diplomatic framework, and force a total withdrawal. Serbian forces pull back. International peacekeepers roll in, and the displaced go home. The roadmap was defined, and every player understood the sequence. Now, look at our current standoff with Iran. Try to find that playbook. It doesn't exist. The core American demand is zero nuclear enrichment forever. Tehran has publicly vowed they will never bow to that. The naval blockade is designed to fracture their economy, but Iran is actively using Moscow's back door to survive. And dozens of ghost fleet tankers are already slipping through the net. The Lebanese ceasefire is a slaughter in slow motion. Iran promises the Strait of Hormuz is lost to us. Deal or no deal. Our envoys are phoning it in instead of flying out. London is sounding the alarm, and those stranded sailors are left waiting for a miracle. If the administration is harboring some classified master plan, a concrete "we do X," they do Y, and the war ends sequence, they certainly haven't bothered to loop in the American public, Capitol Hill, or even our closest global allies. And here is the hard truth. You need to understand a geopolitical standoff operating without a theory of resolution is not a campaign of maximum pressure. It is a campaign of maximum cost. And that cost isn't being paid by the politicians. It's being paid by the merchant marines trapped in a crossfire. It's being paid by the civilians dying in the crosshairs of a fake ceasefire. It's being paid by working-class American families shelling out $4 a gallon just to get to work. And most tragically, it is being paid by the 13 Gold Star families who have already sacrificed the ultimate cost. Let me close with this. To me, the most alarming part of this entire geopolitical chess match isn't just that adversaries like Russia and Iran are actively teaming up to bypass American influence. It's that Washington seems to be sleepwalking without a compass. When you wage a campaign of maximum pressure without a clear endgame, you aren't projecting strength, you're just bleeding resources, alienating your closest allies, and leaving innocent people in the crossfire. The hard truth we are watching unfold is that the global order is shifting rapidly. Our adversaries are playing a calculated, long game, while our leaders can't even be bothered to board a plane for peace talks. The crucial lesson here is that foreign policy is never just some abstract concept happening over there. What happens in the Strait of Hormuz directly dictates the price of your groceries, the cost to fill up your gas tank, and the stability of our domestic economy. We can no longer afford to tune out. We have to demand accountability. If you found this breakdown valuable, please hit that like button and share this video so more Americans can wake up to the reality of what's actually happening. Don't forget to subscribe and ring the bell so you never miss a briefing. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. How do you think this standoff actually ends? Stay sharp, stay informed, and I'll see you in the next one.